totally the wrong person to be here in certain respects. I don't own a smartphone. I was sent something that I inferred was GPS coordinates in an email, but not only do I not have GPS, I don't have electric windows. My right arm is much stronger than my left, and I don't have a radio in my car. So I'm one of those people that feels as enslaved by technology as liberated by it. But I gather this isn't just about technology, it's sort of about ethics and ethics education, and so I was very pleased to be asked to come along despite my ill-suitedness in certain respects. And so I'll try to say a few things about what we've been doing at WITS with this thing called the Applied Ethics for Professionals program. All right, so our philosophical approach to applied ethics and to professional ethics requires thinking about these abstract questions. And a note regarding codes of conduct, I sort of hinted at this a minute ago, but think about, for instance, a code of conduct for something like human research ethics. One of the things, if you look at the engineering one that's outside, one of the things a philosopher is going to want to look at and ask about is, what should a code of conduct contain exactly? And why those things? Why not other things? Over and above clarifying some of the terms like integrity or honesty or responsibility, I always ask, well, what should a code of conduct say for human research ethics and contain, and what is beside the point of human research ethics, or not grounded in some deeper or more important thought? All right, so that's what I have in mind by content here. We take things a few steps deeper than what non-philosophers do when they think about ethics. This is not to say that it's better or worse, it's just different. But since we think that these sorts of things underlie the ethical thinking embodied in intelligent people's thinking processes and in the codes of conducts that they try to formulate and try to adhere to, this is the direction in which we push our students as part of the process of thinking more clearly about issues in applied or practical ethics. All right, so we have to think about these things, and we try to get our students to do that, and indeed to recognize not only these sorts of questions, but the kinds of things philosophers have had to say about them, which is plenty. All right, so here's 4 kinds of background claims, and I don't have time to elaborate on them all, and count your blessings. If I did, you'd wish I didn't have time to elaborate on them all. So, but let me just sketch them very quickly. As I say, this is meant to just give you a rough feel for the kind of thinking that we engage in and that informs our program. So the first is that ethics is susceptible to reason. And the idea here is this: we all make moral judgments. We sometimes change our moral judgments, but we all make them. We often disagree with each other. But what I think a lot of people recognize when they start thinking about it, and it doesn't take very long for them to do so, is that responses to ethical judgments, moral judgments, that certain things are permissible or are poor values or are bad character traits and so forth, that a perfectly natural question to ask in response is, well, why? Why do you say that? Why do you think that? Think, for example, now about the ongoing debate about the expenditure on Nkandla and our president's moral responsibilities here. Those that say that the president ought to, dare I say it, pay back the money, when people make that claim, when they're not shouting at each other, a perfectly respectable question to ask people that say this is, well, why should he pay back the money? Why is that what he's morally obligated to do? Similarly, when people say, well, no, he's under no obligation to pay back the money, the perfectly natural question to ask is, well, why not? But if this is a sensible question to put to moral judgments, we're already seeing that there's a place for reason here. The people that disagree about the morality of the Nkandla expenditure aren't just expressing how they feel about it and leaving it at that. Right, you say he must pay back, I say not, let's go have a beer and call it a day. No, we think that we need good reasons to think that our president must pay back the money or some of it, or that we need good reasons to think that there's no such obligation on him or any moral responsibility on him. We're not just sort of expressing our differing approvals or disapprovals. Right? But if that's the case, and this is sort of a corollary, I suppose, of the first point, if this is the case, then ethical judgments and ethical thinking in general admits of and indeed requires moral or ethical arguments. sets of premises meant to rationally persuade listeners or hearers of the truth of their conclusions. So, in fact, this is what has gone on in the Akandla debate. Those that think that the president must pay back the money have given arguments for why he must. He benefited in ways that bore no resemblance, for instance, to his role as president. That's a moral reason why, moral claim, he morally ought to pay back the money. There'll be other premises, of course, to fill it out and make it nice and tidy, but there we have the basis of a moral argument. Similarly, those that defend the president on this one will say, look, yeah, he benefited all right, but he didn't ask for any of this stuff. And, this is other people's failures, and why, morally speaking, should a person, the president or anybody else, have to take responsibility for someone else's errors? Now, obviously, I'm not going to arbitrate on that. What I'm trying to do is give sort of simple examples which we're familiar with of what we have in mind here by a moral argument. Right? And we do this all the time as ordinary thinking people who care about ethics, which I presume we all do since we're all here today, when we debate with family members or friends or colleagues about moral matters, whether we like it or not, we're putting together, when asked that why question, moral argument. So as a concluding note, very concluding, what the Applied Ethics for Professionals program tries to do is to take non-philosophers who are interested in ethics, have appropriate kind of academic background. Many of our participants have been out of university for 20, sometimes 30 years. The little notes that I skipped over are ages range from 25 to 65. What they have in common is that they're interested in ethics, want to learn to think about it more, and so what we try to do is, through exposing them to deeper philosophical questions, which we often need to appeal to address applied ethical issues, as well as learning to think clearly, to use arguments better, to evaluate arguments better, and to formulate arguments for our ethical views, to inform the thinking that they already have by infusing the philosophical content and this particular philosophical method into their thinking. The program's not for everyone, and if it was, God help us, because we wouldn't be able to deal with the amount of interest in ethics that we find in South Africa, witness the current audience. But that's roughly in a nutshell what we're trying to do here as one kind of ethics education. Thanks very much.